wanted to do a short video where I look at Socionics and I look at the ILI or the INTJ. It's INTp in Socionics, but it's INTJ and MBTI. I wanted to look at it in a greater depth, so I have my results of the test, but I actually want to look at each of the cognitive functions and how Socionics ends up defining these cognitive functions as opposed to MBTI, which I have looked at in the past. So let's look at introverted intuition, NI. Generally associated with the ability to recognize unfolding of processes over time. I do agree with that. How one event leads to another. Have visions of the past and future. I don't know if I like the wording on that. Developmental imagery, yes. See intangible hints of relationships between processes or objects. Types that value NI always like to have in mind a specific plan for how their life will develop in the future. Thus, they have little time for the concept of living for the moment. I try to do more of that these days. Generally engage in pure leisure activities only for short periods of time. That's true. Even their leisure activities generally involve a psychologically demanding or competitive aspect. Yeah. As a hobby, I'm looking into personality, and I'm taking personality tests. Okay, leading function, that's what I have. Generally manifests itself through a lack of direct attention to the world around oneself. Maybe. Sense of detachment or freedom from worldly affairs. Highly developed imagination, very unique mental world, but can result in a great deal of laziness and apparent inactivity. Maybe that's what it looks like to you. Individual gets his or her primary information about the world through imagination. Person leading with introverted intuition may be able to thrive in situations where data are scarce. Yeah, maybe. Or where he or she lacks the usual prerequisite experience. Yeah, because we can kind of we can see the logic of how something flows together and make predictions, right? Speculate. Look at how the process naturally flows. And so when data is scarce or there are asymmetrical information markets, we might be able to exploit and take advantage of that. This may become a disadvantage if the person ignores real data about the world. Yes, so don't do that. The ability to transcend the axis of time and understand the cause and effect relationships that occur is also a feature. Yeah, I am transcending the axis of time all the time, to the point where it's a little rough. Accurately predict general future trends and outcomes of certain events. Interesting. Okay, so that's the lead function. We're looking at extroverted logic, TE, and we're looking at the creative function. Algorithmic logic, practical logic, yes, practical logic. TE perceives objective factual information outside of the subject. Analyzes rationale and functionality of what is happening or being done. Okay. TE type can judge a person to be effective if he or she is able to achieve his purposes without wasting any energy or producing unwanted side effects. Yes. Now, are you aware of the efficiency equation? Your output divided by your input. To have a one-to-one efficiency would be great, but you know what would be even better? Just putting in the tiniest bit of input and getting the most output out of it. I put in one thing, I got 5. That's 500% efficiency. That would be awesome. Let's look at it as a creative function. It is manifested as a preference for factual accuracy over ideological consistency and for objective, harsh communication over careful words. Maybe. I like to try to manage that a little bit. A view of the external environment being efficient, reasonable, and making sense is essential to their well-being and sense of inner peace, but they do not feel a pressing need for being proactive or productive themselves in that area. So yeah, I mean, I don't have to force it. I like when things are, moving along pretty reasonably and efficient stuff, but I don't have to be in control of that. Someone else can control it if they want to. Okay, role, SI, leads to an awareness of internal tangible physical states and how various physical fluctuations or substances are directly transferred between objects, such as motion, temperature, dirtiness. The awareness of these tangible physical processes consequently lead to an awareness of health or optimum balance within one's environment. The individual physical reaction to concrete surroundings is the main way we perceive and define aesthetics, comfort, convenience, and pleasure. So introverted sensing is related to following one's own needs. So instead of focusing externally on things you would want to acquire or achieve. Types that value SI prefer to spend their time doing enjoyable activities rather than straining themselves to achieve goals. They like to believe that if activities are done with enjoyment, people will give them more effort and time, and also becoming more skilled at what they are doing in the long run. Okay, yeah, kind of like building something over time, but differently from the way that introverted intuition does it. That's why this is the function that I'm like, nah, I'm going to reject this. They believe that goals should suit people's intrinsic needs rather than shaped by the demands and constraints of the external world, so do not try to force others into doing things they don't want to do. Try to be easygoing and pleasant, preferring peaceful coexistence to conflict, except when their personal well-being or comfort is directly at stake. I can understand that. That makes sense. The individual dislikes it when others emphasize the need for relaxation, enjoyment, and activities that are supposed to bring these about, because what they need internally is just the opposite, a need for action and resolve. I don't want to listen to what my body is telling me. It's such a small description. I think it's accurate enough. Oh, yeah, that's fine. Extroverted feeling. Extroverted feeling, generally associated with the ability to recognize and convey passions, moods, emotional states, generate excitement, liveliness, feelings, get emotionally involved in activities and emotionally involve others, recognize and describe emotional interaction between people and groups, and build a sense of community and emotional unity. Fair enough. Types that value extroverted feeling, like creating a visible atmosphere of camaraderie. Enjoy a loose atmosphere where anything goes, where people don't have to watch too carefully what they say for fear of offending others. Interesting. Try not to be too thin-skinned, taking jokes with a grain of salt. They are very conscious of the fact that the way something is said is very important to how it will be received, so they tend to add emphasis, embellishments, and exaggerations here and there to keep people engaged. The best way to say something is highly dependent on the situation and the implied purpose of the exchange. I do agree with that. Levity is not appropriate in some situations. That's very true. Even after explosive arguments, these types find it hard to hold grudges and can tolerate. I don't know about that. I feel like extroverted feeling types can hold grudges, but maybe it's FESI. Maybe those are the types who hold grudges. Can tolerate people they in principle don't like, as long as the situation is primarily social and doesn't require too close contact. But yeah, but then they'll go behind your back and talk about you or gossip, right? Interesting. They prefer misgivings to be out in the open unless they're being passive aggressive. The silent treatment is one of the worst things you can do to a person and only aggravates the underlying problem. Interesting. I think that starts getting into sort of like the ethics of socialization. And I think people can hold different views on that, even within the realm of extroverted feeling. So I'm not sure if I agree this to be true of all extroverted feeling types. I think it can vary. But maybe it's because I misunderstand extroverted feeling. I don't know. As a vulnerable function, the individual tries hard to never let himself come apart at the seams emotionally, or even let out strong feelings publicly, because displays of passion do not come naturally and make him feel self-conscious and vulnerable to painful criticism. Yeah, I can't disagree with that. This makes the individual generally seem emotionally neutral and politely indifferent to excitement and agitation around him. The individual deeply dislikes attempts by others to get him to cheer up or join the fun, especially in the context of group activities with loud emotional expression. Yes. If you want to understand an INTJ, at least understand this. At least understand emotionally neutral. Please understand that. Okay. Extroverted sensing, suggestive. SE includes the ability to know how much power, force, or influence is latent or required. I agree. Much more comfortable with direct behavior aimed at making an immediate impact? Yes. May be perceived as abrasive, particularly by types who do not value SE. So it can sometimes be a little bit abrasive to me, but I do really admire and appreciate it, honestly. Usually a competitive edge to this style of group interaction. You can see that in sports a lot, honestly, resulting in a more intense atmosphere than introverted sensing. Interesting, yeah. Appreciate contemplating possibilities only if they feel like they stand to gain something from it. Okay, yeah. Or has perceived potential impact on the real world. Yeah, I think you can tell extroverted sensing and extroverted intuition apart because extroverted sensing can really get into the different possibilities, but it's the different possibilities that have an immediate impact on the sensory world. Whereas extroverted intuition is going to be more ideas focused, I feel like, and the possibilities of, where can this go? What can this do? How can we transform this? Unlike introverted sensing, which is about one's subjective sensory experience, how intense or enjoyable it is, extroverted sensing is about achieving an object of desire. Maybe. It gives one the ability to influence, bend, and push situations and people in order to achieve such an object, rather than to enjoy the situation one is in. So extroverted sensing as creating a shared experience with someone. Extroverted sensing doesn't have to be about people, but it can be. It can be about people and sharing an experience with someone, but it could also be by yourself in the world, right? Interacting with the world, having the experience, but not necessarily internalizing it like introverted sensing would. Okay, let's scroll down. Suggestive function. Characterized by inertia. Great. Left to own devices may choose to do relatively little to interact with the outside world. Unfortunately, yeah. I need to get out more. When he does interact with the outside world, often finds to be empty and unfulfilling. I don't know. I like to change that attitude. Characterized by periods of stimulation. True stimulation is often spontaneous. Interludes between periods of stimulation are often characterized by tedium, inertia, and apathy. Yeah, maybe. But again, try to change your attitude about it. Not very adept at finding new areas of interest? Okay. It's not that I am not adept at finding new areas of interest. It's that I usually want to pursue one area of interest for a specific period of time. To get into it, to have a little bit of depth to it. In order to break out of this cycle requires an outside stimulus of spontaneity and activity. I do agree with that. Such a degree of spontaneity introduced into life, the tedium and perceived meaninglessness is replaced by a constant state of activity in which can experience new things and escape the confines of his own mind. Okay, so it is offering some advice on balance. Yeah. I mean, obviously you don't want to live within the sometimes chaos of constantly switching between activities. No. But it is good to selectively introduce spontaneity and other activities. Change your environment. If you are depressed, if you are going through apathetic depression and you are an INTJ, as we are prone to be apathetically depressed, I suggest changing your environment. Change your environment. I think that's the way you're going to access an escape route from depression. Different types of personalities experience depression differently. I would not suggest this approach for an ENFP because ENFPs are changing their environment all the time. So if they're depressed, ENFPs want stability, probably. That's my guess. Whereas a very stable type, like an INTJ, experiencing depression will need change, will need to introduce change in the environment so that their mental state can follow that and change. Additionally, very indecisive. Within the physical world, yes. Okay, may know what to achieve in life in a broad or long-term sense, but will find it very difficult to set and finish the short-term projects leading to it. Sometimes, I think you have to really develop a very good extroverted thinking, and then that's what drives you into these short-term projects that can be very useful in building towards your introverted intuition goals. In order to be able to act, he needs tangible definite stimulus from somebody well-grounded in external reality and who has a clear picture of what must be done in a certain situation. Do I need to befriend more extroverted sensing types? There is this really cool girl. She looks amazing, awesome, and she shows up to regular trading card game activities that I do at the game shop. She has to be a lead extroverted sensing type. I would think ESFP. She always says hi to me. I mean, people do greet you whenever you walk into the game shop or whatever, but I think it's really sweet. I think she has an introverted feeling soft spot for me. Which is always good when extroverts adopt introverts. I actually really like that. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I can develop that relationship a little bit more because she seems so cool. Okay, mobilizing. Getting to my introverted failing finally. Types with valued FI strive to make and maintain close, personal relationships with their friends and family. Yes. They value sensitivity to others' feelings and occasionally will make their innermost feelings and sentiments known in order to test the possibility of creating closeness with others. Yeah, even I do this. Even with it as my third function, I do this. These types convey emotions in terms of how they were affected by something, such as I did not like that. Rather than extroverted feeling approach that would describe the object itself without clear reference to the subject involved, such as that sucked. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Huh. That's an interesting distinction. Okay. But I mean, people just talk differently, so that's not completely reliable. But if this happens more often than not, maybe they're extroverted feeling. Because they're just clearly referencing the direct emotionality rather than processing it through the self. Fascinating. Much of their decisions are based on how they themselves or others in relation to them personally feel, in contrast to considering how the big picture is affected, such as groups of people. Yeah, more individualistic, subjective, definitely. Okay, let's scroll all the way down. The individual longs for establishing stable personal relationships with other individuals based on mutual trust and understanding, where deeper and private feelings and experiences can be easily shared. Yes. However, the individual lacks the initiative to establish such relationships. Yeah. Usually expects others to make gestures in that area. I do admire those who do so. I do. In the context of extroverted ethics FE, as a vulnerable functions, it should be emphasized that these types especially value emotional bonds where feelings go unsaid between partners and are simply understood. If I like you, if I value, if I appreciate you, it's just a fact. It's a constant state. I don't feel the need to continually reaffirm that. So if someone else relies upon words of affirmation as their love language, they're not going to like me. I'm not going to give them what they need because I just consider the relationship to be a fact. That doesn't discount the fact that it's there, that it has that depth. It's just it's a security. It's there, which I don't see as a bad thing. I love you and the love exists. Even though it's intangible, it is a factual constant. Okay, extroverted intuition. Let's get into it. NE is generally associated with the ability to recognize possibilities, create new opportunities and new beginnings, recognize talent and natural propensities in others, reconcile differing perspectives and viewpoints, rapidly generate ideas, and be led by one's intellectual curiosity and stimulate curiosity in others. Yeah. Types that value NE prefer to try out an opportunity rather than consider all possible ways in which it could not work out. They pick a few options and stick with them, in contrast to introverted intuition types who pick the one option and continue to doubt that option. Isn't that a little mean to me? NI types who pick the one option and continue to doubt that option. I think of it as healthy skepticism. We're testing it out. Extroverted intuition enjoy discussing unusual insights into the nature of the world and crazy out there ideas like space elevators. Dope. I'll discuss that with you. Typical Ennequadra humor juxtaposes seemingly unrelated phenomena. That's my sense of humor too. Observational irony. That's where I live. Juxtaposing seemingly unrelated phenomena. I like that. Let's scroll all the way down. The individual understands external connections made between different areas of knowledge and experience, but prefers to focus instead on hidden connections. Don't love the word hidden ever. Connections that have special significance and help understand. No, stop it. Stop it with mysterious hidden shit. It's not mysterious, it's not hidden, stop it. Able to readily grasp the intrinsic potential of a given thing or situation. Yeah, intrinsic potential, sure. Prefers to restrict indulging such assessments in the face of understanding the latent processes underpinnings of said things. Yes. So if I think something is really interesting and fascinating, even if I can see multiples of these, oh, that's fascinating, and that's fascinating, and that's fascinating. Even if I can see and recognize that as being fascinating, I'm going to restrict my view because I understand the logistics. If my goal is to understand something fascinating, then I actually have to select one thing, and then I have to examine it thoroughly to understand the underpinnings of it. And then once I have an understanding of that thing, I might reach out again and select this other thing and connect it. So it's like a blob that grows over time. And the blob is really my conceptual understanding of these different instances. But it's going to be a very long process of sort of like, it's like a pulsating sort of rhythm of like a jellyfish, really. I'm going to reach out and I'm going to grab something. I'm going to examine it. And pull it in. I'm just going to move about like a little conceptual jellyfish. That's not a good analogy at all. That's terrible, but it's fun. It's aesthetically appealing to me. Okay, we're finally getting to TI. According to Socionics, it is my demonstrative or last function. TI is generally associated with the ability to recognize logical consistency and correctness, generate and apply classifications and systems, organize systematic conceptual understanding, see logical connections between things, similarities, differences, correlations, by means of instinctive feelings of validity, symmetry, even beauty. Interesting. Never heard TI described that way. Kind of like common sense in that it builds on one's expectations of reality through a somewhat personal, though explicable, understanding of general truths and how they are manifested. Ooh, I want to do TI the disservice of comparing it to common sense, because TI usually bucks common sense. It's actually kind of a rival of common sense in most cases. I think TE is more in line with common sense. Types that value TI naturally question the consistency of beliefs that are taken for granted in everyday life. See, bucking common sense. They strongly prefer to make decisions based on their own experience and judgment, as opposed to relying on external authorities for knowledge, which they only use as a last resort. I like to intermix both. They also have a respect for people with clearly defined and internally consistent opinions, believing that a sense of internal certainty is necessary for orienting oneself in life. To these types, one's personal standards of truth are more reliable than public consensus. Yeah, that's how I would describe TI. One's personal standards of truth are more reliable than public consensus. TI. They see overly pragmatic views as shallow and try to limit public discussion of mundane practical matters. They are especially sensitive to redundant information. Also true. As a demonstrative function, the individual often criticizes others' views from a logical standpoint, picking apart statements and postulates and showing that they are logically flawed. Yes, I will do that. The more logical fallacies you put into your argumentation, the further down I rate you. However, he does not choose to do this excessively and does not expect that reality can be accurately. Yes, Okay. Does not choose to do this excessively. I do not. I only do it defensively. If I am forced to debate someone, if I am forced to defend myself or justify my values or beliefs, I will tap into this demonstrative side of things. I will use logic to demonstrate why my mental processes have reached an accurate conclusion, have reached an accurate reflection or representation of reality. So I did a video where I took the color test, the color drives. What was that called? Soul Trace? So I did Soul Trace that examined 5 color drives. And of its 25 personalities, it put me as a magistrate. And within the magistrate subtype, it listed me as someone who has to demonstrate the process of my logic to show you how I came to a conclusion. And I think that's what this is, TI as the demonstrative function. So that really explains something about me as a person. And it's interesting how this soul trace system is picking up on something that is identified within Socionics. This is something that MBTI seems to lack. Because, as I've expressed, I have been recently questioning what is introverted thinking and how is introverted thinking so different from my introverted intuition. I can see people expressing TI behaviors, and I can see how me, myself, am more extroverted thinking oriented, and how my extroverted thinking differs from TI. I can see that, but I haven't been able to fully verbally conceptualize what introverted thinking is. So it's kind of this problem I'm trying to work out and solve within my head. Maybe I'm working my way through my shadow type. Like I've figured out extroverted intuition, and now I'm working on the critic. I'm working on introverted thinking. So maybe I'm doing shadow work. I don't know. Maybe there is something to it. Okay, so demonstrative. Does not choose to do this excessively. Does not expect that reality can be accurately expressed in a neat, logical, systematic anyway. Yeah. Reality doesn't operate in terms of logic. People are not logical. You cannot expect them to behave logically. You can hardly even expect them to behave reasonably or rationally. You can't expect people to pursue their own self-interest, even if they're being altruistic. Is that a dim view? I don't know. I tend to think of it as functional. I'm a pragmatist. I don't see it as being pessimistic. I think people should pursue their own self-interest. That's how you divine your purpose and meaning in life. And that's how I'm going to end this video. I hope you have a good day. I hope you can divine your own meaning and purpose in life. It's a big ask, I know, but let's do it. Let's do it.